Hello, everyone. I'm so thankful y'all are here with me. I am going to be painting a beautiful painting today. This is inspired by practical magic, and show you the little visual here. I've got the printout that you'll have online, so you can print this out. And then I've got mine printed on some canvas paper so that I could run it through my printer. Makes it very fun and easy. And so I'm so excited about this one. So we're going to be celebrating this in the fall. So I wanted to get it to you early so that you could prepare for all of your parties and everything. But again, I will have this one, and then coming soon, I'll also have a cake because in the movie they reference eating cake for breakfast. And then this is for the margaritas at midnight party. So even if you don't drink, you can still have fun with a mocktail party. So I think it's very fun. So mocktail margaritas are great. And then you could also have a real margarita party if you want to as well. And I don't know about you, but I'll be celebrating early. So I'm very fast asleep by midnight. I'm an early riser. So, but I still think it's a really cute concept. We're going to have a lot of fun with this one, but I wanted to come on and say hello in person. And then, of course, we're going to shift over to our aerial view so that you have a much better view while I am painting. So here we go. All right. Let me go ahead and switch here. Hit the right camera. All right, here we go. Hair in position, sleeves rolled up, make sure everything's still in view. All right, so here we go. So I've got everything laid out. I got my water, napkin, paint, and of course, everything will be in your supply list as well. Scoot this up just a little bit. All right, so in the background, but that's what we're going to go ahead and start with. Put it on my fancy lights. Yay. All right, so I've got my little family of brushes. So today I've got the mama brush, and then I have my little buddy. There, that way you can see a little better. And then I've got the little bit brush. All right. And then just acrylic paint, water. And we're going to go ahead and start with that background first. And what's beautiful about having this print out like this is that a lot of this will just kind of barely see through. I mean, it'll kind of show through the paint, which we love because it helps us preserve the shapes. So if you're a beginner, you're not going to panic if you lose it. But even all the stuff in the background is very easy. So even if it does get a little bit obscured and lost, it's a very fun, organic, easy process to do over the top. All right, so this is going to be like a beautiful kind of dusty charcoal gray happening here in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a little bit of black here, and then just a teeny amount of the white. We're going to mix that together because I just want it to be not pure black, but you can see it's very, very dark. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water to this to make it a little bit watered down here. I say usually a little soupy on the plate here. All right. And then let's put this off to the side so I can continue to work here into it. And then I'll start to paint this onto the surface here. And add a little bit of water. And we're just going to start to paint in all of this background. And I can be fairly loose with it. This is a large area. And I'm keeping my texture just kind of back and forth here. And then I'm going to bring this a little closer so you can see, but I am seeing the line work just barely show through. So that is encouraging. And if you're not and it scares you, you can add a little bit of water to it and that'll help thin out the paint. And then that definitely helps reveal some of that line art. So that'll give us good coverage in the areas that we want it to have good coverage in. but then it also shows us our line art so that we can still fill back into that. All right, now I need to go ahead and start thinking about some cut-in work pretty quick. And this brush can be pretty big and sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming when you get near it. Now, as I'm working into large areas, again, very free, and I can hold that brush more over to the side. Just kind of crisscross that brush back and forth here. But when I have to do cut-in work, then I want to hold the brush more like a pencil where that handle goes straight up and it gives me more control. So that allows me to come in close to a line, for example, or cut in next to a shape. But with this being so tiny, I will want to utilize some of my little kiddos here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab little Betty. And this just is easier to navigate through here. And I can go a little heavier with the black. And by the way, I do have kind of it almost appears as though it is like a watercolor look. So having that water give that acrylic paint a watercolor look is actually very desirable. I love the way that looks. So that's a good thing. All right, so that was a lot easier to get into that small space. Pick up a little bit more water. And then we're going to go ahead and work around that crescent moon. So again, I'm holding this brush more like a pencil. And I'm just working around that edge. Well, now that I've got that cutting work done, I'm going to rinse out, let my brush rest there. Kind of feather this back out into the background now. Going into a little bit of that water. And this little boundary here, you don't have to really pay attention to it. It's just something that was created with the printer. So I just go ahead and take it to the edge. If you were really wanting that boundary for some reason, I would tape it off. But it's all of this will just go into a frame as an option. So it's really not necessary. I'm just going to carefully come in here. One other thing I'll tell you too is with this cut-in work, if you wanted to use your little bit brush, a little bit smaller, you can take that one as well. I do a little twirl into the paint, basically twirling it between my fingertips. That will give you a nice fine point, and that will help you cut in with really great precision too around that little shape. That'll dry off. Grabbing some more of the mix of the black and just a little bit of white. Grabbing a little bit more water here. And then we'll go ahead and take this all the way out to the edge. And again, pay close attention to your texture because as it dries, the texture in which you paint will actually be visible. So you do want to keep some variety going with little cross strokes back and forth as a finishing touch. Just helps catch that reflective light on the dry paint. Nice. And we're going to get close to some cut-in work again. Now, as long as it's a big shape, we can use our mama brush and cut in pretty close using the line edge of the brush, or you can go back and use your little bit brush if that makes you feel more comfortable. Mhm. And a little bit of water, and then crisscross back and forth. And then I'll just kind of continue to feather this out a little bit here. So that it blends into the background. And then we're getting really close to that little bit of salt on the rim. So again, you can do the cut-in work if it's comfortable with the mama, or you can switch over to your little bit brush. Really pretty. And doing loose little touches inside there. If I have a little bit of overpaint, not a big deal. We'll come back in towards the end and fill that in with that. Going to be white paint with a little bit of texture. And so that will pop really well and show up nicely over the top. I'm going to carefully go around this edge here. Beautiful. Carefully around the flame. And all these lines, they just really work beautifully to help maintain really nice shadow work underneath too. So it's really nice. Carefully around that edge. And then remember to kind of feather out those brush strokes when you're done, so you have that nice texture. Looking good. Do a little letting up there. And then carefully letting here. You can also come in with little Buddy in this little area. It's kind of getting a little crowded with Mama, so I can do my little crisscross strokes just to help add that little bit of texture that you won't really notice a lot now, but when it dries, you'll see it. And then I'm going to let Mama rest for just a second here. I'm going to come in with a lot more of Little Buddy because this area all throughout here gets to be a little bit tighter. And so it's going to be easier to do this cut-in work with Little Buddy. And some of these, even a little bit, do that little twirl. This gets pretty tiny in here, so use a little bit to go ahead and work into those little areas. Might even give little buddy a break. Now we're going to go in with little bit because we have lots of little areas in here to work in. This is all of that rosemary, and this is also referenced a lot in the movie. So excited for this party because we're going to have like an outdoor fairy party. That's how I roll. I'm a little bit more witch adjacent. I'm more fairy, Glenda the Good Witch, if you will. That's my vibe. Still just doing that beautiful cut-in work. Love how this is turning out already. A bit more water, crisscrossing. All right. I love it. So pretty. Okay. Now, while we've got this black, there is a little bit more of the um, black candle that we can work on here. And so for that, I'm just going to take a little bit. We're going to go ahead and work on that. I do want to preserve real slight. It actually gets to be a lot darker to have that contrast. So, but just in case, so that we don't lose that shape, I'm going to lighten up with a little bit more of the lighter charcoal here, right next to this edge that surrounds that candle so that you don't lose the shape of it. So we're definitely going to come in just a little bit of a highlight here around the edge of the candle. That kind of almost helps act as a little bit of a glow too, the rounding glow around it. We're looking in, it's just a lighter shade of gray, because then we'll come into the candle with just black. But I definitely want that to have some contrast and distinction. Now I'm going to go ahead and let me just rinse out here for a second. Go back in with the little buddy and back with that darker color. And now we'll just kind of softly blend that in now to the rest of the background. So using that background color that we already had mixed up, softly work into it. Do a light overpaint here. All right, really pretty. Okay, so now we're gonna let little buddy rest. Now we'll come back in. And by the way, if this is a little bit much, and you're like, "Ooh, I'm not liking that subtle contrast that I'm having to do, you can have a vanilla candle. You can just make it like white and mustard gold for a light cream. And that's for a real easy way to have a lighter shade there that would be fun also. All right, so I'm going to come in with pure black and little bit, and then I will go ahead and work this into that candle. I'm going to paint this all the way into that whole shape here. And we do want to be careful around that little label because that's already done for us. So that's a beautiful thing. And draw a curve around this side. If we cut in around that little flower. Really pretty. And then we have it come up. You can use a little bit of a softer gray in here as we progress up, but just make sure you keep it black right there, anywhere around the edge. So you keep that contrast. But as soon as you get away from that edge, you can lighten up a little bit. And then there's a little bit of a push with black here and a little bit of a push with black here. And then also a little bit in here and a little bit in here. So it's almost like making little dashes in these little areas here. And then we'll go into more of that lighter charcoal gray. And we'll just let's grab a little bit more white, make it a little bit lighter. A little bit more of that here and here. Okay, and then a little bit more here and here and here and here. And then you can come back in and just give me a little push of that black and another push of the black right there. Again, it just feels like dash and dash. Okay. And then I'm going to do another twirl into that black. And then we'll do the black in this edge. And then here. And then go through here. Got that contrast. And we have a little bit of that gray through here. And then we'll go ahead and just let that set a little bit. And then I've got some other colors that we'll be working on a little bit later. All right, let's go ahead and go to our book here as well. And this is that same thing where we do want some contrast happening. So just more of the pure black. And of course, you can make a different color as well. So let's go, you could do some red, or you could have fun and do any kind of color that's your favorite color. So let me start with this black here. And I'll do the cut in around that rosemary. Still using little bits, still cutting in. And I'll take this line all the way to the edge. Really pretty there. All right, and then we can continue. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water to this to give that watercolor look. Even more. Let me use little Buddy here for just a second. Grab this out into that spine because I want all that to bleed through. It just kind of gives an old distressed look as well. And one of the beautiful things that you can do as you're painting this as well is a fun eraser trick is that you can actually take a napkin and you can completely just kind of touch down. I'm just going to show you as an example. And that helps pick up that paint too. Creates a nice little look. That's fun. All right. And then let's go ahead and start on some of this beautiful brown as the base here. So I'm going to turn the plate a little bit, go into my brown. I'm going to grab a little bit of that mustard gold with it and just kind of work this into the background. And brown's already kind of translucent, so see how you can just see right through that flower? I'm going to go ahead and do an overpaint because that'll actually give a nice base of color to that flower before we start to do the cut-in work. So all the way around here. Okay, so go around that glass. like that. Just work right in through here. Now I'm going to switch over to my little bit. So I'm going to do a little twirl in here. We've got some smaller areas to get into. Put my cut in. We're going to do the inside of that flower as well. Again, that'll be a nice base. That's out. Now let's grab our little buddy again. Do a little touch of gold here. And just some nice little horizontal drags over the top. Make sure and hold your brush a little bit more parallel here to the canvas. That'll give some nice texture over the top. Light little drags with our mustard gold. And then we've got some dark shadows that we can do too with a little bit of black. So I'm taking little buddy and touching into a little bit of black. And then just little tiny drags can create that little bit of shadow here. Carefully cutting around that little flower. Just do little tiny pulls. And a little sweep of it here on this edge. And then right around the book here too, there's some shadows happening here. A little bit of black. And just kind of lightly kind of drag the brush kind of back and forth. Looking really good. All right, now little buddy again. Little push of that black, and we're going to come in around that little leaf and the flower. We can still see the line work. Little yeah, just that little shadow around that shape. And then a little bit more push of a black on there. And we're bringing this in. And then on that glass. A little bit of shadow here on this side too. A. All right. Yay, I love it. So pretty. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start to work on this cute little book here. So we'll do a little bit of our brown and our mustard gold. So brown and mustard gold, some water. See what that starts to look like. Mustard gold here. Got a lot of water in there so that, again, very translucent. You can still see all that design work. We want that to work for us. Hold your brush more parallel to the canvas. And we can add a little bit of white here too. I'll do some sweeps. I have lighten that up a little bit. Add a little bit of water to it. And if you're getting a little concerned about it, did dull it out a little bit on there. But remember, there are beautiful Sharpies in the world, magic markers. So especially with that, you can come back in and redo that. So I'm kind of looking for that old world look here. And pushing that paint right off the top. It's just going to look a little bit old. And back in with a bit of black and that shadow. Okay. Love it. All right, now we're going to work on some more of this rosemary here. All right, so I've got my little bit brush and we're going to grab some white and some green, mix those two together. Also some mustard gold. We're going to mix all those together, about 3 equal parts, green, white, mustard gold. Let's take a look at that real quick. So mustard gold, white, and some green. I want to make sure I get enough too, where I have plenty to work with for the entire plant. And it can have variations too. So if you do have to remix and bring in more, you can. Also, sometimes a little bit of brown in there really brings in that gray quality that we need. So that's really pretty. Love that. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and set this off to the side here. And we can start to push this into those little shapes. So with little bit brush, you can do a little bit of push that creates that rounded edge, and then have to pull that off the canvas with a light hand. And so kind of a push and then start to pull up. As you pull up, it gives you more delicate brush stroke and makes the line thinner. So pushing down, more pressure, thicker line, lifting up, thinner line. And you can add little touches of pure gold in here too to actually add little accents. Do that a little bit as you go. So again, it's going to be pressure and then lift off with that light hand. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. I gotta do a brush rescue. Poor little buddy. Okay. I have an old wooden floor, and so my chair gets a little stuck sometimes. Okay. That little bit of water. Again, going back into that sage, do that little twirl. And then again, we'll just kind of fill in here. And you can touch back into, I'm going to touch back into a little bit of brown sometimes too, to kind of add little accents over the top. Right over what we just did. See how that's kind of helping to find those little tiny strokes of rosemary. Just a little accent. So that's a fun way to come back in, makes it easier. So, and this stroke kind of makes you feel like you're doing a long parentheses. And then while it's still wet, I'll do a little touch of that brown. With that nice little accent, blended accent while it's still wet. That's really pretty. So just like a soft curve, soft curve. Now I'm going to come back in with that brown over the top. And push, big stroke there, and then lift off with a light hand. Now come back in with a little touch of the brown. Basically just echo that same move that you just did. Yeah, super pretty. All right, so I still have a little bit of water on my brush. I'm going to come in with a little bit of the white and a little bit of that mustard gold. And I'm just going to do a little accent here on my little label. And a light wash over the top. And then just kind of make it look, looks like it's got a little bit of an age to it. Yeah, a little bit of water, a little bit of white, a little bit of that mustard gold, kind of look that right over the top. And give a nice little bit of an age look to it. And that's really pretty just the way it is too, just kind of being very faint. So that's definitely a way to do that. Come back a little bit of the black. Tighten this up a little bit here. Really pretty. Also, while I've got the black, I see the edge of the, or the bottom of the flame rather, is just a little, the wick has got black right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. And then let's see here. Okay, I'm going to, it's like decisions. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start to work on this little part right in through here. So this has got a nice little golden tone to it. We've got orange on our plate, so we've got a little touch of orange. And then we're going to grab some mustard gold here. Take a look. All right, so mustard gold and orange, really pretty. And I'm going to work this into this little section right into here. Little tiny delicate strokes. You want to act like you're just barely touching the canvas. And we're going to take that same color, do a little twirl, and then we have just a little bit of a light dash right through there in the center that gives that little accent. And then we're going to use the same brush and then do the accent around the edge. This is definitely got, feels like a parentheses right around the edge here. And then right there in the center. And then there are little accents of this as well, like right in through here. You can do a little tiny dash in through here. And then also in here, give that accent. And then a little dash of it here, a little dash of it here, and here. And then in here too. Slight touch in there. Let's rinse out, and then we're going to touch into a little bit of the yellow and the white. Yellow and white. Twirl into that. And then we'll do that in the middle. And then there's like a little half circle there, half circle here. Comes around. And then I'll look the edge of that with that little bit of orange. I had way too much water in my brush. I'm going to do a touch with the napkin. I'll lift that right up. Dry off, go back into the orange. And then I'm going to just come right around the bottom here with a little bit more of that orange. A little half circle in here on either side. Almost like making the letter C and then C. All right, it's looking really pretty. All right, and then let's go back to, I'm going to rinse out. Let's go back to our little bit of, and a touch of rosemary here on the label. I'm going to squeegee out that water, go back into that sage green. And then it's just tiny little delicate touches over the top. And that black, that little hint of black still kind of shows through. I actually really like that. All right, really pretty there. Awesome. You can also use this same sage green for the lime color, since it's a bit muted, that'll really work out well. So I'm gonna take a little bit brush here, and I'm going to go ahead and line out that little bit of lime right there. Really pretty. Okay, rinse out, dry off. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and do some of my really pretty little leaves in here. So I'm going to grab a little bit more brown to mix in with that sage that we mixed up. So this is really light. I added more brown to it because we're going to darken it up. And then I'll work this into these little leaves here that are on the table. So again, this is like a soft parentheses that comes to a point. And then I'll fill this in. And then again, little soft parentheses, fill that in. Parentheses, and then kind of take it out to a little tiny point and then fill this in. And again, parentheses, and then fill this in. And then kind of hold that brush more like a pencil, bring it out to a nice little point. And then you can come back in with a little bit more of a shadow. I touched into the brown. And we're just going to make a little tiny line accent throughout those. Do another little twirl. You can also do a finer point, more twirling into the black, and just do a real tiny little line of black right through the middle. That's also a fun little look. And then little diagonal strokes to each side. That's also really cute. A little bit easier when it's actually dry. And you can also do that with a Sharpie. I have one more little section of leaves over here. Got a little bit more of that darker green. So then little parentheses, fill that in. I'm just doing a few little touches for accents there. Like I've just got a little bit of that darker green. I just kind of barely touch, little push and then lift off with the light hand, like little accents happening. All right, so I've rinsed out, dried off here. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of a dirty white into that flower. So I'm going to grab some white and a little touch of the brown mixed in with the white. Gives just the right color that I want. Let's pull that into the light to see that. So again, a touch of the white and then grab a touch of the brown, mix that in, and that gives that kind of a dirty white. So we don't want it to be real pure white on that flower, but we definitely want it to have a white reed. So got that going, and then let's go ahead and got a little bit. We're going to do a little push into that petal shape, and then as we pull towards the center, we'll lift off with our pressure so that it thins out and makes the stroke thinner as we get towards the center. So again, more full push to spread out those bristles, then we lift up, and then those bristles thin out as we get towards the center. Push, that's thicker, that's more pressure, pull towards the center, lift up with pressure, and then it thins out that throat. So push thick, lift up, thin. Again, push thick, lift up, thin. Push thick, lift up, thin. thick, lift up thin. And add a double coat too. Push thick, lift up thin. All right. So pretty. And then that center is just almost the right color, but we need to add texture in there. So rinsed out, dried off. We're going to go and take a little bit of our mustard gold and just kind of tap, tap, tap for some of that beautiful texture. Tap, tap, tap. And then we're going to also touch into that brown and tap, tap, tap. Tiny little taps there. And then go ahead and dry off. And then we're going to touch into a little bit of the black, teeny amount of black. And we're just going to do tiny little line dashes out in between the little petals. And always lift off with the light hand. And you can add a few little taps with that black too. Really pretty. I love it. Okay. All right. I'm also going to come back into my rosemary and add some of these gold accents here. So I've got my little bit brush and my gold. I'm going to do a little twirl into that. And we're just going to make a few of those little, almost like the reference of the branch underneath or the stem. It's just light touches of that. Just have a little bit of a light curve and then lift off with a light hand. All right, pretty. All right, then rinse out. All right, we can go back to our little buddy brush now. And we've got our, we're going to make like a pale yellow, but have a little bit of a gold with it too. So we've got yellow and then white. We're going to mix those two together for very pale, pale, pale yellow. And then there's just a little tiny touch of brown with it too. It kind of dulls it a little bit. Water to that. Right, that is perfect. And then we're going to go ahead and work this into the glass. So cutting around this beautiful little line shape. A little bit of water. And using my little buddy brush, just working this in here. And that line art is bleeding through beautifully. So pretty. Love it coming together. And we have a little hint of this down into the glass. Pull that down onto each side. Like that. All right, now up at the top, we've got some pattern work to do. So I'm going to take my little bit brush and come into this dark charcoal gray that we had in the very beginning. I still have a lot on my plate. And do a little twirl into that. And I'm just going to lightly kind of cut in here. Just a little bit. And see that lovely bit of salt helps keep it defined. And that's that part of the painting process that's going to be really easy for us. Continuing in with this little section here. Just holding a little bit, just kind of like a pencil. And then there's a teeny amount here that's also going to be that dark charcoal gray. And a little bit into here. Just like that. Love it. All right, now another little twirl here into it. And then we've got, it's almost like making a little happy face right through there with black. And then underneath here, we'll start to fill in with that dark charcoal gray in here. Water, swirl. All right, now let's go ahead and take a little bit of that brown, still using a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and work that brown into this next section because that's what's showing through now. I do like little happy face strokes here just to kind of keep that reference of the pattern happening. And then we've got like a little happy face, a little happy face, parentheses here, parentheses here. Parentheses, parentheses. Kind of take those soft curves all the way around. Rinse out. We'll grab a little bit of this dark charcoal and kind of do the same thing here, a little bit of that dark charcoal now. And a little dash, a little dash, a little dash. A happy face. And come back in for the brown in here. Little dashes of shadow. And then a little bit again, and then little tiny, need little tiny strokes and do a little twirl into that paint again. And then just tiny little pulls in vertical, not the whole length, but just little dashes of it. And teeny tiny. Okay. Good. And then this out. And then we're going to grab a little bit of the orange and the brown. Do a little twirl in that. And I've got a little accent there. Another little accent here. Here. Like little dashes. Little parentheses. And that orange and that brown's nice and translucent to where it can have a nice little cover over the top. Won't obscure anything. So a little bit of water, orange and brown. And I'm adding a little bit more to that too, because I'm going to add some shadows up over the top here. Again, we've got brown. I don't want it to be too dark. A little test here, add some more water. Yeah, it almost kind of starts to feel like a little bits of watercolor. So again, we've got a little accent here. So soft curve, press, soft curve. Kind of follow the glass here. Drag that across. Soft curve. And drag it. A little bit of a soft drag here. Here. Getting that nice little bit of shadow and soft curve here. And then a little bit of a touch in there with that brown and that orange for your accent. And let's go back in with a little bit of that dusty yellow. Little touches. Little drag flat over the top a little bit here too. All right, also with that pale yellow that we made here, I'm going to go back into that and we're going to go ahead and color into the lime wedge. So those little triangles, work that in here. And that black definitely shows through. So you can be a little bit loose with it here. You don't have to be so perfect. All right, it's looking really pretty. About, you can touch a little bit of that white. I've got too much water in there still. A little bit of white here. And then you can do little tiny touches of the white that comes all the way around. Missed a spot on my sage. I'm going to touch into that and do that right into here. All right, really pretty. Okay, taking off my shirt here. Hold on. I'm in the sunroom. It's starting to heat up a little bit back here. All righty, we still have our crescent moon to do. So it's going to be, and still use some of that pale yellow, but I'm going to add a little bit more of the mustard gold to it. Do a little twirl into that here. And then just work that around that shape. Fine point. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that orange and that brown, little twirl into that. Gives a nice little curve and shadow. And then you can come right back in with that pale yellow, do a little bit of an overpaint, a little bit, and softly blend those two together. All right, really pretty. Now let's see what else. Okay, so we still have the little bit, it's so nice because the trace even leaves that white where it's just like, wow, that looks really good all on its own. But we definitely need to add a little bit of texture to it. So a couple things you can do. You can either paint with the bottom of the handle, which is fine. You can dip into the white, and that's just going to give you a little bit more of that texture to kind of dot in over the top. Or you can use your brush handle too. But to me, it gives a more fun texture and easier texture to make those perfect little circles that pop out right over the top. This is really cute. Love it. 5 o'clock somewhere, or midnight somewhere, as they say. So lots of little dots. Get some really pretty texture here. And we'll continue to dot this out over the top of the line because that's where that cup wants to, it needs to look like it's in front. Again, we had a little bit of a paint through there. So this will help fix that perspective. All right, beautiful. And then I also need to come back in and do some pure white accents. I'm gonna take my little bit brush and just pure white paint. And I've got like a little line here with this little dash and lift off with the right hand. And then another little one right here. And then we have a little bit of a swipe, but it's on the side of the brush. So it's like that, just that that look. And then a little look what's happening in here. And then that little soft curve, little dashes, make the accents. And then we have a little white accent here and here, here, like a little swish. And here, here. Okay, touches. Mhm. These are just little dash strokes of light, of that reflective light in here. Little touch, dot, dot, touch. Another soft curve here. Soft curve. A little soft curve there. A swish. Little soft curve. Long dash there. Little dash, dash. Really pretty. See here. I'm also going to come back in and add a little bit of reflective light on the candle glow. So a little soft curve, that was more white here, a little soft curve here and here. Now, glass here. I had to trim this a little bit too. Just have better angles. Touch there, touch there, touch there. Kind of touch here and here. Grab a little bit more white. And we're gonna accentuate that little glow here and here. Tiny touch here and here. And then we can just do, actually, I'm gonna squeegee out a little bit. So just one teeny amount here, but just a little touch there. A bit of shading to that one. Just barely touching it, doing a little movement back and forth. And so pretty. And come back in with a little bit more white and kind of do a little accent of white over the top of this little flower now. Just little pushes of pure white paint now over the top. We had more of that dirty white before, so this pure white will just look like a more vibrant pop right over the top there. All right, see here. Now we can do a little bit of some of those swirls, and they are still showing up. Like you can kind of lift up and see where they're at. It may be hard to see in this. Okay, but now you can see what I'm talking about. You definitely have visibility on those. So if you're beginning, you're like, where are those? I need those in my life. They are still there. Okay. So now I'm going to do a little bit of the gold now. So I'm sorry to keep hitting my camera. My hat keeps hitting it. All right. All right. So I'm going to do a little twirl into that mustard gold, and I'm just going to follow that twirl. So I hold the brush like a pencil and then just go in a circle and then lift off with the light hand. And then I'm going to have another little twirl. Put this one back in so I can see it matching. Got a little bit of a thickness to it. Grab a little bit of orange. Kind of subdues it a little bit on the black. Do a swirl. And then I come back in with a little bit of water on the other side, the flip side, kind of softly blend that in. Using my little buddy now to kind of lift off. Got a little bit of black. Do another little soft blend right back into that. Kind of work back and forth. All right, and again, a little bit of the gold. All right, a little bit of gold now. And these can certainly just be free-handed in because they're just little wispies of shimmer happening, basically. But they do not have to be exact at all. All right, and then add a few little white highlights to this. You can even kind of let it dry brush a little bit for that accent. And you can certainly make it a little bit more subtle as well. It doesn't have to be as vibrant as this. And then let's make a few of those stars. And we're about to do a real fun little spray effect that will obscure a lot of this as well. But a little twirl into that white and that yellow. The little stars. So they kind of just look like you can make like a little plus sign to begin with, and then crisscross. Just real simple. There's that little plus sign, and then crisscross. One more over here. And there's a little plus sign, little crisscross there. All right. So now, oh, there's one. Let's do one more here. Now we can start to have a little fun with that fun little splatter look. This is cool. Okay, so let's take our little buddy and we're going to go ahead and touch into, let's grab some white, the yellow, a little bit of mustard gold, grab more water, and then we'll do that fun little, it's like a little flick here where it just kind of starts to flicker on there. So I'm taking my nail and just kind of rubbing it on the edge of the brush. And if it makes you nervous, you're like, oh my gosh, I could get too carried away too fast, then start somewhere else. And then when you feel like you've got the right amount, then you can take it to the canvas. That way you can be a little bit more brave with it. But I've got quite a bit of this happening. All right, that's super cute. Okay. So I'm going to paint mine on, but I'm also going to recommend and show you. Really, I have them up around here somewhere. It's tiny. Oh, I do. I do. Okay. So if you have a fine point, you could just do any, monogram that you want and fill in over the top here. And this is so much easier to do with a Sharpie. So I could certainly recommend that for shaky hands, beginners, and it just looks like paint. I mean, it doesn't look like. There's also really fine point paint pens, but kind of hard to beat, especially if it's already black. It's kind of hard to beat the fine point of a Sharpie. It's hard to get any finer than that. A lot of paint pens, you can find them. Poxa or Posca, I would say it wrong. Posca has one that's really got a nice fine point. So that is an option. And then if you want to do the paint, then a little bit of water. Let's turn this back around. Do that twirl. Definitely twirl it until, and you always want to add a little bit of water to it because that thins out the paint. And then you do a nice twirl, really fine, fine point, very delicate hand. And you just want to barely touch. And you can start to work in to the little shapes here, like a little fleur de lis. Soft curve, just barely touching. It's a really delicate hand. And that's why I do recommend the little Sharpie because you can apply firm pressure and have a lot more control. Soft curve. All right, very pretty. Okay. Now you can certainly add more detail with paint, like on the book spine. There's some, you can also take a paint pen, not a paint pen, but a marker. We'll do a little test. That one is not, I'm gonna throw that away. See what this one's like. My little paint pens are kind of fat right now. But you can do a little paint pen action. Kind of follow these real easily. All right, and let's see here. So, and again, on lettering here too, you can come back over it with like your Sharpie to help. Those are pretty tiny. Highly recommend working that back in that way. Or right now with actually the paint wash over the top, to me, it just looks like a nice little distressed look. But if you did want to come back over this, you can. You can also, reinforce like line work this way too. Same thing with this in here. You can just do little touches to help reinforce those little designs. I'm trying to think here. Make sure I've got all my little touches in place. Now, what some other final notes here, if you're trying to teach this for beginners or if you are a beginner and you definitely want to make some of this a little bit simpler, making the book some different colors can really be helpful. I mentioned, you could make this book like I think red would be a really cool color or a lavender, or even this, the gold tones, anything that has a darker contrast to the background, you could certainly do that. And let me just give you a little example here. So a little bit of the white and the brown, lighten up that brown a little bit. Swirl into that. And even just that little amount creates a neutral, but then it's easier when you're painting next to that black. You don't have to worry about trying to set up that contrast. And some little touches here, a little different. A bit of water. Add a little bit of gold. Feels like parentheses, 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 parentheses. Do a little bit of white here. Then you can redot. It's kind of fun. So I'm going to take the end of the brush. Okay, there's some black there. And just kind of do little polka dots. And those are really fun, easy little patterns to do. Doing a little bit of gold here, mustard gold. You can do a little bit of white if you want. Little tiny accents. And just following up with a little bit more of the black. And we have that undercoat of accent there. And I'm gonna go behind a black. That looks like a dark charcoal gray. So it's just fun. All right. And then you probably stop working. I've got a lot. I've got a lot done here, and sometimes you can just continue reworking and reworking. You don't need to rework it anymore. But this looks really great. We've got a great start here and a great finish. So it looks really good and super cute for the season. Very, very fun. All right, and then that traceable really helps a lot with this one. So, all right. So I think I keep wanting to work and do little fun accents and play. This is a fun painting. But all right, probably let y'all go. All right, well, enjoy the rest of the day. Have a very magical day, and I will see y'all very soon. Much love to y'all. Toodles.